Go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody tonight. Sorry we're a few minutes late. We were trying to work on some technical challenges up here. We think we've got some stuff figured out. So let's go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, so this evening we have Commissioner Shagrood with a thought and or prayer, so we'll turn some time over to her.
Okay. I have been thinking about Centerville. And Centerville is basically built out to this point. It's not a new developing city. And right now we're working on infill projects. And this is much like working on a patchwork quilt that has a few holes here and there that need to be filled. Changing the patches out of our Centerville quilt is a transformation. Transformation is not a future event. It's a present activity, and that creation of that patchwork quilt is ever changing as the holes get filled in. I hope that we can have in our minds what we want the outcome to look like so we don't get lost on our way. This is why an updated general plan is important, so that the general plan will give us the direction that we should be going. Thank you.
Perfect. I like the analogy of a patchwork quilt. That is,
That's good.
Yeah, very appropriate. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move right along. Let's get started with our first item on the agenda. This is a legislative decision scheduled for a public hearing. This is a zone map amendment at 1756 North Main Street, and we will turn the time over to Mackenzie.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Daly and members of the commission. Can you hear me okay? Do you want me to turn
You're
up?
kind of quiet, yeah.
I'll just turn up my mic
Okay.
because I can. Okay. Wow, now I can hear myself. Okay. So this item, let me pull up the map and plan. So this is on Main Street and Jennings Lane. You can see on the screen the lower property is 1738 North and the more north property, 1756 North. The two property owners have done an exchange of title, which normally just can happen at the city admin level. But because there are two different zones, this was escalated to the Planning Commission and then therefore the City Council, just to make sure that all the zones are the same within a single property. And here is a closer view of the changes of that boundary line. So only a few feet, but it's not a straight across line. Just so you're aware of what is happening. The requirements for a zone map amendment, we need to take into account what the goals, objectives, and policies of the general plan are, and whether it's harmonious, if it comes up with any adverse effects, and if there's enough facilities and services. As for those last three items, this doesn't change the neighborhood. Since it's already built out, there's sufficient facilities and services. And then just that first item for the general plan, this is in neighborhood 3. Mostly the objectives of that neighborhood is to maintain single-family housing. This does that. It's not really changing much. And so because of that, staff recommends approval of this zone map amendment.
So Mackenzie, just to be clear, just to understand this completely, the existing boundary line is a straight line, but we're essentially going to add a little zigzag to it.
That's correct.
Okay. And I actually noticed, I drove by there today on my way to take my son to soccer practice. I noticed the fence and does that little zigzag.
Yes.
So are we just matching the fence?
That is what the applicants were doing. They had already built a retaining wall and put a fence on it, and then I'm not sure why they did it in that pattern. So, but this is just to make the properties match existing infrastructure.
Okay. Because normally we don't like zigzags.
That's correct, yeah.
things.
Yeah, we don't like them, so.
So the dashed line there is what?
The dashed
it
is
currently
the
is.
original, yeah. And then that solid line is the proposed.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions for staff? Okay. Do we have an applicant here?
No, he's not here.
Okay, that's fine. We can proceed without an applicant in this case. All right, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing and invite anybody who'd like to speak to this particular zone map amendment to come forward and do so. Well, everybody's here for a later event, huh? Or a later item. Okay, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And any further questions, comments for staff? This one's pretty straightforward. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I will.
Great.
I hereby make a motion to recommend approval of the zone map amendment of property located at 1756 North Main Street from residential low to agricultural low with the following reasons for action A and B as found in the staff report.
Second.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. We'll start down here on this end with Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
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 That motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're on a roll. Let's get going with number 2. This is also a legislative decision, also a public hearing, and also a zone map amendment. So this one is for a rezone at, let's see, well, it's a Chad Morris application, Canyon, well, that port doesn't matter. So I would remind everybody that the zone map amendments need to be considered absent of any potential development or whatnot. So we're just looking at the zone map amendment at this point. So we will turn the time over to Mackenzie again.
Okay, thank you, Chair Daly. Just like the previous item, Chad Morris is under contract to purchase this property and combine it with his current lots. Since they are different zones, to add them and combine them, it needs to be rezoned and to match the residential medium. It's currently residential low. So once again, well, to reiterate what you just said, Chair Daly, zone map amendments cannot be tied to site plans. So in this instance, the site plan is being contingent upon the zone map amendment. So this can either go forward or not, regardless of the conceptual site plan. But that conceptual site plan will need to be contingent upon this zone map amendment. So previously, the objectives, what needs to be reviewed in order to change a zone. This parcel is in Neighborhood 1 as well as the Jewel Creek Historic District. They have overlapping goals and objectives, which could be competing, but for the most part match up. They want to, where there's single family, maintain single family. Where there is medium density, they want it to be harmonious with the neighborhood, since this is already in a medium density zone, has both duplexes and a little higher density to the west. Staff finds that it is harmonious. And as previously stated, there is sufficient services for this lot. It's already serviced from the residential low side, and that there's still sufficient services from residential medium. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to single out on this one. Yeah, just that in addition for that Jewel Creek Historic District, new development or redevelopment needs to be sensitive to the historic area. We've seen proposals for things that match the historic district. We can't really enforce that at the zone map amendment stage, but we can at other items. So staff recommends this application for approval as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mackenzie. Anybody have any questions for staff on this zone map amendment? All right. Then at this time, we'll go ahead and invite the applicant to come forward and speak to this if you'd like to, and address anything related to the zone map amendment.
So map, really the only thing I have to say is, I mean, it's the boundary line, just want to make sure everybody's clear, it goes straight across. This should be part of it anyway. It caught me by surprise, actually, when it wasn't, so I don't think there's nothing crazy or surprising about this request. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the applicant before he runs off too far, but he doesn't? No? Okay. Then we will go ahead and open up the public hearing for this one as well. And I will just remind everybody that at this stage we are discussing the zone map amendment. So if you would please keep your comments related to the zone map amendment. You'll have an opportunity shortly to talk about the conceptual site plan for the development. So if anybody would like to speak to the zone map amendment, you can come forward and do so at this time. Okay. I don't see any movement going on, so I'm going to assume that you're all waiting to talk about the next one. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you. Any further comments or discussion? I think, in my mind, this one is kind of straightforward as well. It feels like the north side of the block there should be residential medium, the south side residential low, and this is an anomaly in that.
And it's an anomaly because it was owned by someone who lived on the south
Correct.
side. And now they've sold that section.
Correct.
So, I mean, it makes sense that
makes
it
sense.
was that way.
Yeah. It makes sense both ways, and so it's not out of the ordinary to do it.
But now that they've sold,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was one property owner, so one zone.
Yeah,
type.
exactly.
Makes sense.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I hereby make a motion to recommend approval of the zone map amendment of property located at 295 East, 300 North, parcel 0209900030 from residential low to residential medium with the following reasons for action findings. A, B, are there more?
That's it.
That's it.
A and B as shown in the staff report.
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Okay, then we'll start over on that end with Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
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 Great. That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, let's go on to the next one, which is an administrative decision in this case. Conceptual site plan for Canyon Point Development, 347 North, 400 East. Chad Morris applicant. And this time we're going to turn the time over to Corey, who is at home.
Thank you, Chair Daly, members of the commission. Just a sound check. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. We have a connection that's stable for now. Let's see what happens.
Don't jinx it, Corey.
Yeah. Just as a reminder, as you have said a few times, Chair Daly, this project is changing slightly from what's originally proposed. It's contingent upon that parcel that you just previously discussed about being integrated into the development. And that final decision still has to be done by the council. So at this point, at the conceptual level, if you choose to move forward, it would need to make sure it's contingent upon the council making that decision. If the council rejects that rezone decision, obviously it changes the conceptual plan, and likely from staff's opinion, the applicant would have to come back with a new conceptual plan, absent or, as I indicated in the report, some unusual potentials to create a single-family lot in the development. But that's speculating that the council rejects it. So at this point, you've recommended approval, staff's recommended approval, so we are looking at this as if it gets adopted by the city council. Just to point out, Mackenzie can pull up this site plan real quick. Just kind of a unique situation that staff found in the review of this project. Think about the lane. You've seen the lane recently. That was in an RM zone. It's located between the Porter Walton Townhomes and the former All Season Spas and Dave's Auto. That's in a residential medium zone only, but consisted of single-family dwellings. And what's interesting about RM development is that we do allow single-family development in the RM zone. In addition, a developer can choose to do multifamily. If the commission recalls, the lane development was only single-family homes, and a lot of the multifamily, non-single-family residential standards are eliminated. It's only, so an example would be is if you are all multifamily, you have to provide 40% open space. If you are single-family, you're not required to meet that open space standard. And so that's an example of where a sole single-family development project in the RM zone would be a little different set of standards. As you recall, the last site plan that Mr. Morris brought forward, it was all duplexes. And since he has made some acquisition of that parcel we previously discussed, he would like to change that conceptual site plan. So he's coming back to you again as a review for conceptual to consider a different layout than what he originally proposed. In this case, he is keeping the single-family home on Parish Lane that was on the previous plan. Then he has the two duplexes to the west of that existing single-family, and then replacing the duplexes that were on the south side of the property line, he's replacing those with 6 single-family homes. And so what's interesting, and the reason why this is important, is that it's not wholly multifamily, and it's not quite wholly single-family. And so our ordinances don't really address the mixture of single-family and multifamily in the same development. And so that's just a gee whiz moment to think about, is if we're going to continue to allow single-family development in multifamily zones, our ordinances maybe ought to be improved in trying to balance multifamily with single-family development. But nonetheless, in this particular case, you do have duplexes that constitutes a single or a multifamily development. And so staff is looking at this regardless of the single-family homes. We are applying the multifamily standards to the project. That becomes important when we're thinking about the 40% open space and how it is utilized. Mackenzie, I know that I didn't mention this prior to our meeting, but if we could just quickly look at the elevations of the single family and the duplexes, just for references. Appreciate that last minute change.
Looks like it might take a moment.
Yeah, it might. If it doesn't, we can figure something else out.
Yeah. For the moment, we're loading.
We've got a moment.
Okay, so just thinking about the single family, if you look at the design of the duplexes, if you simply cut those in half, you're just separating the units or the twin homes from each other and creating individual single family homes. So that's just what I wanted to point out, is the architecture stays consistent. I think you've seen generally this architecture in the past. Mr. Morris is planning on looking at the architecture and applying for an adjustment to setbacks. The adjustment to setbacks on the current plan is on 400 North. And typically off that street, we would require a 25-foot setback. But with the Dual Creek overlay zone, all development in the Dual Creek can apply for an adjustment of those setbacks, new construction and existing development. And the idea is to encourage compatibility with the Dual Creek architecture. They have 10 The Dual Creek ordinance has 10 items that an individual can use, and they have to use 4 of the 10. And so that's what Mr. Morris will be doing on the 400 north setback if this moves forward. He's going to have to qualify for the 4 elements, which we think most likely he will meet that standard, but that's a separate decision. So we call out in the staff report that he either qualifies for the 20-foot setback, or he has to adjust the conceptual plan 5 feet and move the setback to 25 feet if he fails to meet those 4 architectural elements. We think he will, but I just called it out into the report so that everybody knows. The largest, I think, issue that staff brought up in the report, well, I'll back up a little bit. The typical layout, the infrastructure, the roadway, all of that is seemingly the same as his previous plan. The detention for the project, that was a discussion during the previous conceptual plan. We've gone a lot further down on a staff level with the city engineer and our drainage and utility manager. They've looked at the detention and the storm drainage. It will still be west of the duplex on the west side of the development, because that far southwest corner is a lower elevation. And so to put the water in the far southwest corner would mean we can't drain it. And so the detention will stay towards the north behind that west duplex as it was looked at in the previous approval. I know that previous residents came in concerned, particularly the Granite Square. They're at a lower elevation when you have that retaining wall. The city engineer, the public works director, the drainage utility manager went out and looked at that site specifically, and they believe that the drainage will work. But obviously, we're not at a final construction plan. And so right now we're at this conceptual, and so we will still have an evaluation of that drainage if this move forward with final plan. And then we will have the soil study and all the other elements in the final design, and we'll be able to definitively answer whether the project can handle the stormwater. I think that was a major concern under the last conceptual plan, and staff feels more comfortable at this point that it's likely going to work. So all of the rest of the elements stay in play. The largest element that staff brought up in the report is this discussion of open space. Currently, the plan does show just over 40% open space as per the multifamily expectations. But one of the things that's interesting in our ordinance when we deal with multifamily is we don't want just grass. We don't want just shrubs. In our ordinances, we require them to add more than that in their landscaping. The idea is in multifamily is that you often have common areas and lack a lot of private lot space like you would in a traditional single-family development. And so the idea is that the layout of the open space should incorporate features, passive recreation or active recreation, so that the residents have a place like a yard area and some place to gather, unless they have a big family gathering and need to reserve a park in the city. They have a place that's near to their home to enjoy some yard space like everyone else would in a traditional single family. But one thing we don't want in our ordinances is just the token placement of a tot lot. That seems to be the default, is just throw in a tot lot and we're good to go. And so when we amended our ordinances in 2017, we wanted something better. And the last layout behind, maybe Mackenzie, if you go back to the site plan, the last layout, you'll see the existing home closer to 400 North. And behind that home, you have a common garden area. And the idea of that common gardener area was to still stay within the 40% for landscaping, but provide something similar to a community garden that as part of that landscaping that people could utilize and enjoy some yard space. Our view is that since we're acquiring this property in the southwest corner, it seems like we should not just dedicate that land to open turf. I think the developer's trying to be sensitive to everyone and keep some open space in that corner rather than encroach in another duplex. Because he technically qualifies for 12 units. He's only proposing 11. And I think that's where we take advantage of this other clause we have in our open space. We want some passive and active recreation areas. And so I think an improvement to the project is to look at that southwest corner, and rather than look at just 40% landscaping, let's look at putting some active or passive features into that corner area. If you strictly apply 40% landscaping, then we have the issue of competing plants with features. And in our multifamily, or in our landscaping ordinance, in the non-single family development, it allows the commission to adjust that 40%. And you can work with 10% to add those features in, so long as the landscaping doesn't reduce itself below 30%. And so that's what staff is probably our major recommendation, and the commission will need to decide. Do you want the 40% and we get the gardens that were proposed originally, or do we want to allow an adjustment to that 40%, contingent upon it doesn't drop below 30, and add some additional features of passive or active recreation? That staff's preference is to flex that 10%, and so we wrote that up in our staff report. So other than the items of that, the entrances are the same, the setbacks are generally the same. We're moving to a single family. I think a single family development is much more compatible. I think this potentially is a better product than we had originally. Even though I think multifamily could work, a big concern that I've seen the community, the elected officials, and past comments is that you are adjacent to single family to the further south. And I think this plan probably does similar to what the Lane did in just trying to utilize single family. I think it's also similar to what the Hive did along their northern boundary. The Hive is the former mobile home estates. They put 18 single family units against the residential to the north. I think that's a better project in the Hive. I realize the Hive is a relative decision in whether you like it or not, but I do think as far as uses, the single family adjacent to single family is seemingly more, the appetite for that kind of project is seemingly more compatible. So we're recommending approval. We've got a number of conditions that kind of define this plan, and I think it's really up to the commission to decide, is it a point to move forward? We think it is, and we can finalize some of these further details with the final site plan. So we're recommending approval.
Thanks, Corey. Some questions. Save me some time looking this up. Corey, CCC 1251-050, which is the waiver. Is that the waiver of strict compliance, which we've used in the past for landscaping?
It's a different place. It's under I believe it's under the non-single family development portion. So it's a reduction in the 40% rather than a waiver. So it's similar to a waiver, but it's called out in a different section.
But it doesn't, so I guess part of my question, does it require an application for the waiver, or is it all?
Yeah, it's a separate one. It just says that they can change it, reduce it to 30, so it's not under the waiver section, I believe. So it's your discretion.
So I guess All right. So in your
Not
staff.
a waiver, it's not an official waiver is what I'm trying to say. It's not a waiver petition.
Okay, so in the staff report, you cite CZC 1251-070G, which talks about we got to have at least 40%, blah, 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 shall be landscaped open space. But then if a waiver allowing reduced landscaping is approved according to 1251-050, then we can.
Oh, then I might be in error. That might be official waiver. I just know it's in that one section.
Okay, so then we get back to the, yeah, so I was able to pull it up on the computer, but then we do get back to the waiver of strict compliance, which we've used in the past, which means we got to meet these certain requirements of,
Right. You're right. I just remember the 30 and 40 being in the same section.
okay, that's fine. Corey, in on the site plan, well, you mentioned that within the Dual Creek Historic Zone, you can make some adjustments to the setbacks if you meet certain other requirements, and that's where the 20 feet comes from on the, what'll be the side yards for the duplexes, but would be the front yard off of Parish Lane, right?
It'd be the side yard to the duplexes towards Parish.
Does that also allow for, or is it the medium zone that allows for the essentially 7.5-foot side yard setbacks on the single-family units across the south?
Yeah, if you think of multifamily developments, you can develop multiple buildings on one lot. And so the setbacks are running along the side property lines.
So the distance between the buildings in this case, that's not really relevant because it's all one multi.
It's all one, correct, all one lot.
Okay, gotcha. But then but then there is 10 feet in the backyards, I guess you could say, of those single-family units across the south between that and the back fence.
Correct.
And that's allowed under the medium zone?
It's allowed under, think of it as one site, multiple buildings. The side yard is perpendicular to the streets.
Oh, that's yes, that's the side yard, right, gotta.
Yeah. This is exactly the same way the lane was done.
I don't understand what he's saying. I don't view that as a side yard.
Well, it's a side yard because the fourth east is the front yard, right? And that's the front, and
Why?
so
Why? There's a street going right through the middle.
private lane.
Yeah, think of multifamily,
Right of way
think of-
going private lane.
Hang on just a second, both of you are talking. Go ahead, Heidi, go ahead.
Well, does our code specify that it has to be a public street and not a private lane for the determination of what is the front of the house? Because when I view a house, the front of the house is gonna look like the front of the house. Therefore, the opposite is gonna look like the back of the house. Therefore, I don't think 10 feet I don't understand, there's a little bit of,
Right, so the front of the parcel, in this case, is fourth east.
how is it defined in the code?
public street.
Public street is defined
Yes.
as the front of the dwelling?
Yes. In fact, we actually don't say that explicitly. We just say that it's measured from the public street to the setback line. But we don't define in our code which way a door faces. So an example would be a corner lot. A corner lot has to have a 25-foot setback from one street. And if they have a setback from that street, the other corner can have a 20-foot setback. But our code doesn't specify which one's the front door.
Does this qualify as a corner lot because it fronts two streets?
No, because it's a private lane, so it's no different than a driveway into a multifamily development.
No, but I mean, it's got, on fourth east and fourth north, we've got frontages on both sides, right? So does it qualify as a corner lot because we're fronting both fourth east and fourth north?
No, because you've got the corner lot already established right at the intersection.
Yeah, the Madsen lot would be the corner lot.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering if,
But
I mean, that makes sense, that the Madsen lot would be the corner lot. I was just wondering if this one also somehow.
No, because it's a private street, so just think of it as a driveway.
it's not a driveway. That's
It
far
it is to
wider than a driveway.
multifamily. It is a driveway to multifamily. If you go into, let's give you the flats over in Pioneer. The flats in Pioneer are on the south side of the public road, but the internal lanes are not dedicated streets and the setbacks are not applied internally. It's one big lot with multiple buildings on it. That's what multifamily does. It builds one big lot with multifamily. Now, what he's proposing to do is convert it to a PUD, so he sells property underneath the building for, rather than it turning rental, you do a PUD plat, or it's a fancy word for condo plat, and you sell just the footprint of the home to someone and the rest of it is in common space. And that's how you can make multifamily into ownership or rental.
So the HOA owns the common space,
Yes.
and then individual buyers, owners would own that
Yes.
footprint of the building.
Yeah, think of Cedar Springs. The setbacks are not off the internal roads. They're just a driveway, a drive lane. If you have multifamily, you would put parking on each side and put some canopies over the parking, and none of that's measured at setbacks. Only the public street.
So Heidi, how do we need to, how can we help you out with this one?
I don't think you can. We can keep talking. I'll keep listening.
I mean, I want to make sure that you're okay with that. I don't want to just move on and leave you unsettled. So if we can help somehow,
I just disagree.
you disagree that it's a,
It's a street. For all intents and purposes, that's a street.
well, yeah, functionally it probably is, but
Right.
we're
Whether
not,
it's private or public.
the city's not going to plow it, right?
I don't care.
The city's not going to maintain it. And it's internal to the lot. It stays with the
So
lot.
here's one way to look at it. Let's just take it's a big piece of property. Let's say it's an acre in size. And let's say you're eligible, because we have an RH zone. This is hypothetical, your RH zone, and we approve a conditional use for 12 units. So we take a great big lot, we put 12 units inside one building, and we put a driveway accessing that, and we put parking in a lane along the side and back of that 12-plex. We wouldn't measure the setback from that private lane to that 12-plex. We'd only measure the setback to the perimeter property lines and along the private street. So that 12-plex would have this kind of setbacks: 25 feet from the public street, 10 on one side, 8 on another, and 20 in the back. And it would still have a driveway, it'd still have a lane, it'd still have parking on each side of the lane, and that's how we would measure the setbacks.
I just view the south side of these houses as the back. I
It's the
can't
back
wrap
for
my
the-
head
it's the
around
back.
what he's trying to say, because
It's the back for the unit, but it's not the setback.
But it's not the
Back.
back of the lot.
it is the back of the lot, if you're saying Parish Lane is the front.
Well, but it looks like Fourth East is the front because we got
But
25 feet.
he wants to minimize his setback on Parish,
Right.
and he's viewing that as the front, so he can minimize the setback to 20, because he's viewing that as the front, therefore the back becomes where that 10-foot setback is.
Right, but the front is on Fourth East where you got the 25-foot setback between Fourth East and Unit 6. And then the side yards are, plural side yards, are the 10 feet between the building and the south.
I guess, but it
Lot.
just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I get it. You're right. This is one of those things where, according to the letter of law, it works one way, but it feels different, right?
Well, we're talking about definition of terms here, really, the difference between a public street and a private lane, right? And in the code, there is a definition difference
No,
between
he's
those two.
saying 400 East is the public street that they're fronting.
Right.
There is nothing fronting about 400 East in this design and this development. Nothing fronts 400 East.
Well, you're right.
But both Parish Lane and 400 East are public ways.
Correct.
Yeah.
But nothing is fronting on 400 East. Nothing tells me that is defined as the front. So that therefore all the setbacks are based off of that determination. And I don't see anything that tells me that orientation should be the front.
But you get to choose, right? Just like he explained with the corner lot, there are two sides, you get to pick which one's the side and which
He
one's the
said
front.
this isn't a corner lot.
But I
Yes,
think that,
but you still get to choose one or the other. You're not forced to do both. It's the same rule.
Lisa?
yeah, I just think a significant distinction here in looking at the terms is that they use the term lot, and they are developing this all as one lot. So at this time, you don't actually have a lot line between those units, and they get to pick their front and their front
Yeah.
yard. And then everything else is measured from that. So if they pick that the 400 east is the front, the other side's the back, and the other two are sides. I mean, you could change the code to say any side that is adjacent to a public road is the front yard. I mean, that would be one way to solve it. But
So one of the things that tells you it's the front is that 25-foot setback. That's where you gotta have your,
Yeah, but the house isn't gonna front it.
yeah,
Actually-
I hear what you're saying.
Actually, Paris Lane, it's the side of it also. It's not the front of the buildings there either,
Right,
other than the existing one.
Technically.
yeah. Okay, well,
So I had the same problem when it came before us the first time, because I was feeling like, why can you just suddenly choose this thing? But as I read through it this time, and like Lisa pointed out, this is one lot, which is really, like it doesn't look like one lot. I mean, but technically it is one lot, and because it has that PUD overlay that's gonna, like they're trying to sell just those individual footprint of the home, this whole thing would still be one lot, one held. So if you judge it based on that, it's following the one lot specification, which I don't think is super clear in the code, and I don't think it helps us always to create something that makes a lot of sense according to what we already have in the code. But based on what is in the code and based on what this plan is, that's where I finally came to realize maybe it's something in the code that we need to address based on, like a multifamily situation or on something, even though it is a full lot, if there's multiple buildings on that lot, what does that mean?
But I think we're not in discussion mode yet, so we should,
yeah, well, we're in question staff mode, which that's okay. We've been questioning staff, so that's okay. Okay, any other questions for staff?
So as far as the landscape requirement, this is, I just want to clarify, we're only talking about the conceptual plan now, and we'll get into those details in later approvals, right? I mean, we're talking about, he wants to see a variety of types of landscaping in the landscape areas. None of that's shown or addressed here, but that will be in future ones.
Yeah,
Is that
so
accurate?
when it comes back for the final site plan, it should have a landscaping plan with it at that point, which we hope would meet all the requirements. But that actually brings up a point. Corey, I have a question for you along those lines. On that site plan, if you scroll down just a hair, yep, on that area tabulation, that's where we're coming up with the 40% landscaping. But that to me looks like that might be the net acreage, the 1.8 acres. It's really 2 acres if we go out into the street, and then our percentage comes down. So we got to do a waiver either way, right?
Yeah, that's a potential there to check those numbers at final.
Because should we be using, if we're going to use the gross number for units, we should be using the gross number for landscaping too?
Yes.
Okay. So we got to do something with that anyway. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Matt, you?
Nope.
Okay.
Just,
Go ahead, Corey.
Chair Daly, real quick, the answer is, all they have to provide at conceptual is a bubble map of where they're planning the landscaping and call out those rough percentages. The final design comes at final site plan submittal.
Right. I think we've had this conversation before, probably before your time on the commission, but a conceptual site plan, while we wouldn't like it this way, could be a drawing on the back of a napkin. We wouldn't really love it that way, but it could be, so. Okay, all right, any other questions, thoughts, comments for staff? Great. Then we will invite the applicant to come forward and speak to anything that we've been discussing or anything else that you want to talk about from the staff report or anything else you'd like us to know. If you'd introduce yourself.
Yes, it's me, Chad Morris again. If I had this many redos as a parent, I'd be awesome. Yeah, it's like Corey kind of mentioned, the drainage. I know that's a concern, making sure we get it right. I spoke to a lot of people in the Granite squares yesterday or Monday, and like I said, we're making sure that's going to be done well, taken care of. But yes, this does at least allow us a lot more area to take care of that even, and get that flowing away. So, but in terms of landscaping, you're right, and that's kind of what I've understood too. Like a lot of that's going to, the final design, the final landscaping plan will be at final, obviously. I mean, if you guys wanted, and Corey kind of had mentioned earlier to me that, yes, like that, some of that hardscape, if it's landscape, can be counted as landscape, like he's kind of mentioning there. I mean, if you'd like, I'm willing to put in a pickleball court. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be awesome to have that. As it is, I tend to think that a pavilion, people in that area would love that. Just having an outside gathering area, having an outside area to do kind of some raised gardening, which the demographics that we're kind of looking at, I tend to think that is something that they would like, but I think they'd also like pickleball court if you're willing to allow that to be landscaping, right? So, and we're willing to look at landscaping ideas. I'm not closed off at all to any of that. So other than that, I think that was the only question, really the main question as to, I don't know how to address your concerns with the front and the back and side and whatnot, but that's kind of how we're looking at it, as it's just one lot, and so we've been told, guided and instructed that yes, we need to make one side 10 feet, one side, the back's 20 feet, and so then we kind of choose which direction it faces, and so just like that. But
You don't have to make it 10 feet. That's your minimum allowed. You could make it greater.
I could actually make it 8, right, if I understand correctly, because we're
Yeah.
so that, I guess, yes, we're not, I understand your point that it could be smaller, which we're not doing that. But I understand your point, so.
So the existing building is a house, right?
Correct,
And it'll just stay as a house?
correct, yes.
It's a
Yeah,
single-family home?
single-family home.
Are they going to join the HOA?
The hope is that probably not, that that we'll exclude that part, but I don't know that for sure. I'll have to look at all the codes and different.
Like they'll have a fence around their yard?
See, and I'm not sure on how that has to work in terms of legally with the city. We'll kind of work with the city on that stuff. If they need to be part of the HOA, then yes, they'll be part of the HOA.
Well, it'd be part of the same lot, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if there's a way to exclude them or not. I don't know that yet. That's something we need to look at legally, if there's a possibility for that or not.
And then would they just own their existing structure? Right, so like you're doing with the other ones, they would just own the footprint of their house and the rest of their property would be.
I mean, assuming they're part of the HOA, that's how it would be, right? Yeah.
How can they, but yeah, if they're gonna own more than that, it would be a lot line. Is that correct, Lisa?
Well, if they're part of the project and there's open space, they'll likely need to be part of the HOA because they have to own a pro rata share of the open space. So it would be problematic to try and exclude them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I guess I should state that when I say possibly not part of the HOA, I don't mean their land. I guess I mean them as to making the same payments. For instance, like they have frontage right there for Parish Lane, so their garbage could be put right on Parish Lane. It can be picked up by the city, right? Whereas all these other ones, they're in a private lane, so we need to have a separate contract with, is it Ace? I can't remember, just one of the garbage companies in that sense. So I guess that's kind of what I mean in terms of, are they a full paying member of that? And again, that's not part of this, but you raise a good question. That's all something we're going to be looking into when we get into that. Is it the site? No, this is the site plan. What's the other one? Subdivision? Yeah, so. But great question, because I've been wondering the same thing of how to handle that.
So my question is why? I mean, 3 owners down the road and 50 years later, that's weird. Why?
Excuse me?
You mean why keep that
Why
one
not
house?
just make everybody the same? You've got an odd man out here,
Okay.
and in 50 years from now, that's a weird situation.
You're saying just having that house, are you saying why not knock it down, or why not have them HOA, part of the HOA?
Well, if you're going to keep that existing structure, everybody ought to be the same.
Yeah, and I understand that. Like I say, my mind's not made up, but that's a good point. I'm willing to take
So,
recommendations, you know, that kind
Well,
of thing. So,
it's neither here nor there, because on our decision level, you're going to make it work either way so that it complies with the code, but it just seems like an odd choice.
to not make it part of the
To
HOA.
either not knock it down and make everybody the same, or keep it and make everybody the same.
Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then why keep it?
Why keep
Structure.
it?
Yeah.
Well, we did kind of look at that, at possibly taking it down. It's a little bit of the different situation in terms of you can't put a duplex there, if that makes sense. The way it is, it doesn't fit to have a driveway going in on the side. We just don't have a lot of space there. And then to have space, have space between, if there was another duplex behind that. So in the sense of, to make it worth it, we would need to have 2 units. To just knock it down and put one house on there, it hurts financially. It's not smart to do it. And so where there's also already 2 other homes there, it doesn't necessarily take away from those, because there's already 2 homes there, like existing homes. But yeah, we looked at that. It's just really tough to squeeze in 2 more units on that side, because we can't have a driveway coming off of the main road, if I remember right, to just a single-family house. And I can't remember what, Corey might have to kind of tell, I can't remember what he said, but I want to say that we couldn't have a driveway coming in to just a single-family home, or they didn't want that as well. So you couldn't have a house here, a driveway here, and a driveway coming in off of Parish. So it just squeezed it pretty tight with a car access for duplex.
I understand, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So, I think you've gone through a lot of effort in trying to figure this out, and I, appreciate that. I never like existing buildings, old buildings, part of the new things, because in my mind, it feels like utilizing the space to get the density, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit, if I'm being really honest. I mean, this happened in Hafoka, this happens here, this happened in other things where people pull in an existing home and put it into the lot so that they can get the right amount of stuff on their lot. So I'm not a fan of that, I'll be honest with you, just like straight up. It doesn't feel like it should be part of the project, but I understand why it's utilized, why that tool is utilized, but it does make for some tricky decisions going down the road as far as utilities, like we already talked about, HOA. Obviously, with it being an existing building, it is like non-conforming, so you can have that driveway coming in over whatever you're saying. And that wouldn't be allowed if it were, you know, a new thing. So that's what I think, why there's an existing building there. But yeah, have you looked at putting that pavilion area and all that stuff down in that sort of space
Below.
that's below?
Again, this is kind of, I'm trying to get all, in fact, I just spoke to our engineer today about the drainage. A lot of it depends on what we need.
Yeah.
And because we have just purchased, or purchasing that, I don't know how drainage is gonna look, if we need to have it, how it needs to look, if I'm just gonna have to more make like a walkway around there with, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, some fruit trees. I have no idea what we have space for based on what the city's going to require for drainage.
Yeah.
I think it's a great area to do it. Again, however, if you have that there, the pavilion and that, but anything more than that, I think would be tough, just because you're then, it's just hard surface right kind of next to that lot line, and that's what the neighbors are worried about.
Well, I think, you know, the guarded boxes and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not hard surface.
Yeah.
I'm wondering that because of that existing building and because of maybe utilizing that space in a different way.
Yeah, I've thought of that, and like I say, I think we're just trying to finalize the storm drain to make sure. In fact, when we talked to the Slugowskis who own that, the hope for them, and that we're trying to kind of keep it that way to where it does become some sort of garden walk, because that's kind of how it is now. And I'd love it to be that way, you know. I think it's an awesome place for it. But yes, currently it's just there because we didn't have the spot yet, and we don't know what needs to happen there.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I would say, just to throw this out, another view, I'm comfortable with keeping that existing house building there. When we look at this site plan, it's a little misleading because it does look like the odd one out. But if you showed the two houses on the adjacent lots, those are existing houses as well. And as a drive-by anyway, that existing is just going to look like part of the row of three houses that are there today. It's not going to look out of place. It's not going to look like an odd one out. And, you know, you've got that private lane where the new buildings are. So I don't have a problem with that. I think there's value in maintaining an existing structure rather than trashing it, throw it away in landfill. I think that, you know, it maintains some of the fabric of the existing neighborhood. I don't have a problem with that.
in fact, it might actually, if we tore that down, having just two houses there, might actually make those look like the odd ones out.
So looks like there's a garage back behind that existing building. That's gonna come out.
Correct. Yeah, that's why you don't see it on the plan.
Yeah. And, well, but it's gonna keep its driveway onto Parish Lane, right? That existing house will.
Correct, yeah.
All right. I like the idea of garden boxes. I think that's a great addition to something, to the development. We don't see that very often, if ever. I like that idea. Of course, you know, take Corey's comments about not just a big old piece of grass, even though I love grass.
Yeah.
But yes, especially given, you know, our sensitivity to drought-resistant type of situation. Grass isn't very drought-resistant.
Yeah. I've actually spoken to the last design we had with the landscaping. I was in discussions with them about trying to get some more, not necessarily just xeriscape, but kind of that a little bit less just grass.
Yeah.
But I know that's not what Corey's meaning. He's not meaning, he's talking about landscaping in general, just, and maybe I'll have to talk to him, but I'm assuming kind of what he's saying is throw in a little pickleball court, or, I don't know, maybe, maybe.
Well, and I
I-
don't mind grass. I mean, people use grass
Yeah.
to kick soccer balls
Yeah.
and throw footballs and just go have a picnic. It would be nice if there's some other gathering. The reason why I kind of liked having that pavilion and stuff down there is I could see that space being better utilized next to a swath of grass. And
Makes
having a
sense.
pavilion and having like a place for people to gather in a different way other than just like right next to the road there.
You mean not put the pavilion next to the garden, but put the pavilion next to the grass?
I would say just take that whole thing and put it down in the grass and then have that big area of grass next to it. It just seems like an area that would be better utilized, but, you know, whatever.
Yeah, well, and I'm with you, I'm like, kind of, I don't know, that's why I'm kind of trying to, once we find out what's gonna happen there, we'll probably utilize the landscape designer, because I don't know either. And my idea is, yeah, I think it'd be better down there, and but I don't know that. I'm not a professional in that type of planning, so I'm not sure.
So you'll show us some better ideas next time, basically.
Wait, you don't think you want better than this?
It can improve.
I will say, I do appreciate the environmental costs of not tearing down an existing building, like you mentioned, and keeping that, like, I mean, just as far as what it costs to create a new building, what it costs to tear down a building. I just am concerned about it being part of the
The HOA.
lot. That's what I think is weird. I feel like you just leave it out and let it be and move that other stuff down on the side and then not have it be part of the project, but.
I can understand your thought. It's hard to do that, like, and it changes a lot of things if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
And then, again, you still have the same thing, right? But it's just not part of it, but I can understand your
Yeah.
concern there, your thoughts.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing. We will go ahead and open this matter for the public to speak. A couple of reminders, this is an administrative decision, which means as a commission, we are evaluating this for compliance with existing code. And so what we're looking for, hopefully, is comments about how you view this fitting within, how this plan fits within code or whatnot. Not necessarily whether or not you like it, but we want to hear whatever you have to say. So we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and invite anybody who'd like to come forward to speak to do so. If you'd introduce yourself and give us your thoughts.
My name's Chuck Madsen. I have the Madsen property that this will go behind us. Some of the questions we have, when it was originally proposed, there was going to be a buffer zone between the road and our property. Now it appears that's right on our property line. And I'm wondering, how does that affect? Is that just pavement? Is there going to be a curb? And then is there going to be any privacy fencing there to protect the impact of the traffic and the people behind our property that'd be shining in our windows? Another couple of questions is, where's the snow going to go that you push off of that road? Surely don't want it pushed on our property. And then the bus stop is right where the road is. Where's the bus stop going to go? I don't know these things, they're just questions. And then there's not a sidewalk on our side, apparently. And anyway, I'm hoping for a privacy fence because we have had problems since she's passed away with kids going through the back of our property and out to the street. Anyway, some questions at how that will impact existing people that are already there.
Perfect. I've made a note of your questions, and at the end of the public hearing, we will address those.
I talked to Chad, he said he thinks they might put a fence there. I just hope it can be something that is not just a might, that actually happens to protect that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else?
Eldon Marshall. We live in Granite Square, just west of the complex. One of the big questions I have is the retention pond that they have here. I'm not quite sure what the dimensions of that, how big it is, how large it is, and how it's designed. Now, that retention pond has been moved, as you probably remember, in this plan further to the south. But we have a home, we have two homes that's within 30 feet of that retention pond. And they're downhill from that. In other words, we're 6 feet below the level of this top of this retention pond, and 30 feet from it. So you can see what kind of problem that we could have if there's anything went wrong with that pond and we lost it. That's rocky, that's a perfect drain area right there, right into our basements. So we're really concerned about that. I think it's one of the biggest concerns we have, and the 5 homes along that side. So that is a main concern. Probably a bigger concern than that, and I don't hear well. And I've heard almost none of Corey's, but I've talked. I don't know how. Have you heard much of this? Have you been able to understand? Have you understood this? Pretty much all of this.
There's a lot I couldn't hear when they're
See,
talking.
I've talked to these two. We're having a really hard time hearing this, and especially with Corey. You know, you had obviously a pretty deep discussion on this complex, and I've heard very little. Now, I have hearing problems. I have a hearing aid, so I can't judge everybody's by mine. But when I talk to my friends here, I find they're having a really difficult time picking it up too. So whatever we can do for that. Now, is there do you make a hard copy of this? Is it possible to get a copy of this meeting?
Yeah.
Could we do that? Geez, I'd appreciate so much if I could get a copy. I'd even copy it and distribute just to some of the people in the neighborhood if they could do that. I appreciate it. Other than that, that's my concern. And I can say my home is I was adjacent to the pond before it moved. Now I'm a little bit further away from that, but this would really be, if this was drained, initially this plan was organized so it just actually drained at the bottom. And we made it, I had a discussion with the engineer, and he said, yeah, that's got to have a drain out to the street on that as that comes out to 4th North on that side. And I think that's what it went to. So I don't have any idea how this one is designed. And if it's just an open, a receptacle, or if it's enclosed now, and what protection we have on that west side from any kind of a leakage or a problem from that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for letting us know about hearing. We will try to speak louder.
Excuse me.
We will try to speak louder so that you can hear. So thank you for letting us know.
I don't know, Mackenzie, can we turn the volume up a little bit? Or?
Yeah. I'm sure. But when you get 86 years old, it goes down kind of hill. I spent 30 years on the fire department, so.
We'll try and do a better job making sure you can hear.
Anyway, I appreciate that, but as I talk to my editor, because I know I have a special problem, but the rest of them have a special problem, then we need to get it fixed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
so much.
Yep.
All right, did you turn everyone up? Okay.
Thanks,
I
Mackenzie.
just don't know how good it sounds on the other side of us.
Yeah.
I would, just keep it.
I can start to hear a little bit more echo, so it definitely is louder now.
Yeah.
It's difficult to hear is Mackenzie.
She's got
I've never heard that before.
She's got a really great inside voice, so. Anybody else that would like to come up and speak? Don't be shy.
One more thought. As I asked Chad, where do the garbage trucks go on this? For our property, we now have, this is making it so we have street on 3 sides of us. And we already have the noise of the traffic as it is, and of course, that's been peaceful behind us. Now we'll have the noise of the cars, and garbage trucks are extremely noisy. And again, the privacy fence might help some, but I'm thinking the garbage trucks going on that small little street to carry that. I don't know how you deal with that. I don't know how you does so, but garbage trucks also destroy asphalt, so. Question.
Thank you. All right. Last chance. Okay. All right, then we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you for everybody who has spoken and given some discussion. A couple of things, let's see here. Let's address some of these questions as we go along. We'll start with the retention. Corey did mention this a little bit in his explanation of the situation. It does need to be drained out, it sounds like, to the street. The city engineer will review that to make sure that it meets all the requirements of the city, make sure that it is structurally sound and that that it doesn't pose an imminent threat to the neighbors to the west. So, John, do you want me to reopen the public hearing, or?
It's been jumped around here a couple of times here. I'm just trying to hear the answer to the question. Is this catch basin, is it covered up, or is it an open trough to catch the water?
Okay. We will have, maybe we can have Chad address that one in just a moment. A copy of the meeting. So there is going to be there are written minutes for the meeting that will be available at a later date. Right after this meeting is on YouTube. You can go and find it on the city's YouTube channel. So you can watch it and listen to yourself on YouTube if you'd like. I suggest watching it at 3 times speed. That's the best way to do it. So there are a couple of options for you for reviewing this meeting after the fact. So,
Really quickly.
yes.
Staff, can you answer the question about 3 streets on sides of a home?
2 streets in a private lane.
2 streets and a private lane,
Right.
3 hard surfaces surrounding a private home.
Well, we're back to the discussion of street. It's a private lane, not a street. So according to our ordinances, streets are addressed as public right-of-ways, driveways, private lanes, parking lots, and multifamily are not considered streets. So you only have 2 streets from our standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey, I have a question. Do we have anywhere in our engineering standard that defines the distance that private lane can be from the intersection?
Yes, and our city engineer, I think it's 50 feet, and he's looked at both entrances and believes it complies with his standards.
Okay. Did you get your question answered,
Yes,
Becky?
I did.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we discussing retention or detention? Because there's a difference.
Yes, there is a difference. Corey, do you want to weigh in on that, or should we have Mr. Morris?
Yeah, it's under state code now, if they exceed an acre in size, they have to retain. And once,
Do they have to
Yeah,
retain the 80th percentile?
well, just a minute, let me finish. And so what happens under the review of the city engineer is that he will look at first retaining. If they look at the soils and determine that retention is not feasible for whatever reason, then the city can grant a variance to the state requirement based on the engineering's findings, and then they can move to a detention system only and spill out. My understanding, and Chad can clarify because I was not part of the on-site meetings, but my understanding is it will be retention, but there will be an overflow amount expected in the retention. I believe it's a 20 or 25-year storm is the requirement, and then anything that's overflowing that amount will enter out to 400 North and into the city system.
Okay. And Corey, just to be clear, does it have to go out to 400 North, or is there any possibility of any type of, because I remember when we talked about this way back when, there was discussion about, this is a different project, but the same location, sewage going out through an easement to 300 North, if I remember right. Is there any potential for an easement to have that stormwater go out to 300 North?
No, the city engineer doesn't prefer it to be going out that direction if there's a way to move it into a system closer. So here's what's happening with the water. The city engineer is not allowing a driveway access on either road. It has to be an at-grade entrance under his specifications. And so one of the concerns the city engineer is worried about is we take water on 400 East and it'll come around that radius, and that's the upper elevation of that water. And so he's setting it so that he doesn't have to take that water from the public right-of-way and run it through the developer's property. So the developer will be taking their water all the way down to the southwest corner of the elbow. It'll enter into the detention behind the duplex, and then the excess will run to the north and into the city storm drain down 400 North. Because that elbow is a low point of that road and lane, and if we put the detention in the southwest corner, it's too low of a point to move it out to 400 North. Then we would, if we put the detention over there, we'd have to move to the storm drain to the 300 South, and the city engineer does not want to do that.
Okay. Thanks, Corey.
This might be a question for the applicant, but I kind of want to ask you, Corey. Would this work if the proposed new units on the south side and the street were swapped so that the street were all the way at the south end of the property and the proposed new units would be swapped?
In theory, that's a potential layout, but I don't know the final grades and which one is more feasible. But our requirements, he can go either way.
I think you end up making more private lane. You end up with more pavement that way.
Really?
Well, yeah, because you got to come further down.
Yeah, you have a deeper elbow.
What about the question about the bus stop? Do you know what would happen in that situation, Corey?
UTA is handles the bus stop locations. I don't know where the current bus stop actually sits.
But would they be amenable to moving it?
Well, they'd have to be if it's in the middle of a private lane.
Yeah, they would move it.
Okay.
Okay. Let's do this. Let's have the applicant come up. I've got a few more questions for him that he can address, and we'll leave anything else we need to. So, if you'd come back to the microphone, please, and if you could talk about any type of buffer or privacy fence between the private lane and the Madsen and Clark properties.
Yeah, I mean, for sure there's something on the back because that is two different zones. On the front, the reason I talked to him, the reason we for sure were going to the last time was because it was more townhomes and we had a turnaround right there and there could be lights. I mean, on this plan, I don't see there being headlights really going into their property, more than anything else other than straight up and down, right?
Back turn, that's what lights do.
Well, are you planning on putting a fence there along that north side of the?
It isn't on the plan, but, I mean, is city requiring that? Is that a requirement? I don't know if it's a requirement or not. I mean, I'm totally willing to work with them on this. I mean, it's something
I don't think that's.
Yeah, Chair.
Go ahead, Corey.
Chair Daly, just to weigh in, the property that is discussion is to the north, I believe, on the corner. It's in the same zone, so there is no requirement to construct a fence. That, under the ordinance, would be a discussion between both owners to decide whether they'd partner on a fence or not, but there would not be a city requirement for a fence.
So the only requirement is to the south because that is a residential low zone.
correct.
Yeah.
So, but like I say, I'm totally willing to talk to them and figure this out. I guess I don't feel like it's should be here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know them well, and they're great people, so I'm totally willing to talk with you, so. But
Where's the snow gonna go?
snow, I mean, I see snow going there, corner, a lot behind there, kind of closer to the, I mean, it seems like there's a number of spots it can go.
I guess one of the main concerns is that the snow, the same way you're gonna retain your stormwater, you'd retain your snow.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it's a private drive, so it can't be pushed onto.
Can't be pushed down on the
There's,
public.
exactly, yeah. It
Okay.
wouldn't be on their property, like, or, you know. so-
Right.
Correct, yeah.
You're saying you'd push it to stack space is where you would stack it?
Yes.
You wouldn't just push it off the side of the road?
No.
I see it probably ending up in that elbow or something like that.
That's my guess, or even possibly, you know, in the winter during,
Like
you
where
know,
the
closer
planters
to
are or something.
Yeah, where
Pavilion too, but,
the garden is.
yeah.
Yeah. And then garbage, you talked about this briefly before, getting with Ace or whoever it is.
Yeah.
So the idea is to have individual cans for the units and Ace would just come down the street. on the
Correct,
time.
yeah, yeah, and like the Madsons again have just kind of brought to my attention, hey, they had a place that, you know, and it tore up their commercial, was it commercial? Because those garbage cans, trucks can be heavy. So, yeah, so that's something we need to consider. Now, however, I know the city kind of requires the street, the road, they have an engineered amount of road base, you know, what needs to be there to make sure it's good. Now, that being said, I mean, it's always good to look to the future, so.
Right.
Chair Daly?
Yes.
Just to give you a city perspective on that, they had discussion with the streets supervisor. We do not collect trash on private lanes. And so one of the choices in theory would be stack all the garbage cans out onto the public street. That was not his preference. So he is indicated that they need to keep their garbage on their site, so you'll have that individual service. That service can happen in two ways. They could do the individual cans, and the private service can, under a contract with the HOA, travel that lane. And yes, it is built to city specifications. So the engineer will look at the city specifications, and so it would be no different than a garbage truck running down the city streets. However, the concern about noise is always an issue, whether it's multifamily, whether it's commercial, or whether it's residential. They cannot have a contractor empty trash before, I think it is 6 a.m. And so we have that from time to time in the city and get noise complaints, and we have to deal with them. But whether it's local garbage or for single family or cans or dumpsters, the private contractor has to do it after 6 a.m.
Thanks, Corey.
I have a question for Corey, you or Chad. There are no plans to have a sidewalk going along that north side of the lane, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And are there any requirements, a city required any of that?
As you recall, the last plan, and I think Chad is following the last plan, but you're on to a new plan. Sidewalk is required on both sides of the street unless an alternative path is being provided. And that's what Mr. Morris is providing. He's not providing sidewalk down the back of the existing homes outside of his development. Think a similar situation with the lane. We did a similar thing with the lane. The argument is, why have a sidewalk down one side of the road that's not usable? But Planning Commission, it's your discretion whether you're okay with the alternative path he's proposing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
What about any sort of fence? Your thoughts on that, Chad?
Well, we did just.
Yeah, we just talked about
Oh,
it.
you did?
But, yeah.
We did.
Sitting right here. Sorry.
The
A lot of things I say are forgettable.
The Cliffs Notes version of that is that there's no requirement for a
Yes.
fence, but that he is
Sorry
going
about
to
that.
discuss that with the neighbors and
Thank
figure
you.
out the right way.
Thank you. I'm like staring at this. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I just have a thought. I'm thinking about stacking snow, and I'm thinking about where the mailboxes will go. Do you think that they'll, and I know we have no governance here, but will they each have their own mailbox, or will they have a bank of mailboxes? And the post office is just gonna come put it, if it's a bank of mailboxes, wherever they want, where it's easy for them. If they choose the knuckle, then we're gonna pile snow on their mailbox, and that's gonna be fun. And I know that's nothing we can do, but it just will be so amusing when that happens.
Yeah, that's a good thought for Mr. Morris to think about. Yes, the post office will require a common pedestal.
Yeah.
Just don't, but they'll put it wherever they want. Just try to sway them not to put it where you're gonna stack
Definitely.
your snow.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's real amusing when it happens, and it happens a lot.
Yeah, I'll write that down here.
Are you saying that he wouldn't get to choose where it goes?
Mm-mm, the post office chooses, and they choose what's most convenient and easy for them.
I don't see them driving into the private lane though.
You never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I tend to think they're gonna put it right on that exterior,
Yeah.
but I could be wrong.
Pay attention.
I know, yeah, it's a good idea, so.
All right, anything else that you would like to address, Chad?
Yeah, and Corey already mentioned the detention pond, he explained that. I guess I want to make sure that's clear. There is going to be drainage pipe out to the main road, Parish 400 North, which will drastically, I think, ease concerns that they have, because I think that's their main concern, that it's only held there.
Yeah, so you're planning, you're not gonna have standing water sitting there indefinitely.
It's the hope, yeah.
Okay.
We don't get water anymore.
Yeah.
I know, like 30 years ago we would.
There's no such thing as precipitation around here anymore. Anything else?
No, other than, again, I feel like this is a great plan. And we can adjust it. And I kind of mentioned this to some people, reasons I've come through in the past with some different amendments trying to narrow the road was just so that we can maintain a single family or single level Rambler ranch type home. And I know that's a concern for a lot of neighbors, so we're really trying to push for that. If there are some adjustments, major adjustments that need to be made, I just want neighbors to know that we have to shrink the home footprint, right? And if that's the case, most likely that has to go up. And again, I'm trying to really work with the neighbors to make it a beautiful neighborhood that ties in, not just beautiful, but that ties in to what's below, and then also kind of what's above. We're trying to make it fit in every aspect. I'm not saying this in the sense of if you don't, but, because I don't want it to sound like that. But, I mean, if this doesn't work and we have to adjust because of whatever it be, you know, if we have to put a sidewalk on one side, really we start to get to the point where, okay, now we really do need to shrink the buildings, and the way to make up for that is to go 2-story. I just want neighbors to be aware of that in that sense and not be caught off guard. So, if that makes sense. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay. It's been a good conversation, a good discussion. Does anybody have any other questions for staff before we dive into our own discussion? No. And that doesn't mean you can't ask staff questions later, but anyway. All right, so kind of a couple things to talk about as, you know, Corey has mentioned. Obviously, we have just the general, the point of the conceptual site plan is to make sure that this makes sense, that it'll, that we have reasonable expectations that when we see the final site plan, that it will meet all the requirements necessary, and this is the opportunity to discuss any particular adjustments that might need to be made to give the project the best possible chance of having a successful final site plan. So, anybody want to start? Heidi does, I can see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really don't like the private lane behind those residents. I don't like that it puts the, I just don't like it. And I get it, we can't do what we don't like, but I do not think that as this is designed, it's compatible with the goals of the Dual Creek Historic District. Corey told us that the goal of the Dual Creek Historic District main goal is single family and to encourage compatibility with the surrounding area. I don't view this as being compatible with its surrounding area. It doesn't fit architecturally with the size of the homes and the proportionate open space that surround them. It doesn't fit within the historic lots in this area that are large with moderate size homes to small size homes. So there's a lot of, in this area, the district has large open spaces with small historic homes, and this just doesn't match that to me. So I don't believe it maintains the single family, low density precedent that the Dual Creek Historic District has set. I don't think that having a street or a road or a driveway or whatever you want to call it, driving through here and intersecting so close to 400, you know, to the intersection of Parish and 400 East, that's not congruent with the historic district either. That district has very large blocks with very minimal intersections into the street. So I just don't see this as congruent with the historic district.
So, just as a counterpoint, I guess you could say, the size of the buildings, these, you know, we've got, what, 84 by 52 and 52 by 47 is what we're talking about as far as the sizes of buildings. The 52 by 47s, the single unit ones they're single family homes, right? Like
Yep.
and if you were to build a new single family home in that area, that's probably what you're gonna get, something.
True, but you would
Just
have
like
a
that.
much larger piece of landscape that would surround it.
Okay. The other thing is that the Granite Square buildings, and there's two of them there, are roughly 180 feet by 74 feet. Much bigger than the multi-unit ones we're talking about here. So those large buildings already exist in the neighborhood. They're right next door. So, anyway, just as a,
So it potentially might match what's to the west, but it certainly doesn't match what's to the south or the east.
right, and those are both different zones.
Different zones, but still within the Dual Creek Historic District.
And just to clarify, this development is medium density.
Correct.
What surrounds it, some of it is low density. And I think that's partly what you're talking about, is what you've got single-family houses on larger plots of land, and that's the low density. This is zoned as medium density, so obviously we're going to get a higher density. I mean, that decision, I guess, should have been made when it was changed to medium density, right? But I guess that ship has sailed, so, yeah, it's going to be higher density.
So here are my thoughts. I know we've seen this a couple times in lots of different options. When I tend to look at new development, I think it's really important to look at how it does affect existing development, and obviously it's in the medium density zone. So in my mind, it is fitting what it is zoned for. But even that, how is it affecting some of these existing buildings? Specifically, the two buildings that are not part of this project, that are left to the north of the project, are, I think, going to be the most affected by this project. I mean, they're the two buildings that will have change in their backyard, change, in a lot of what they've had for a long time in the city. So I really hope that if this project moves forward, that is really considered, because yes, it is medium density. Yes, I feel like it follows what is to the west and what it is zoned for, but it's really important that as we continue to redevelop these areas in our city, we are really respectful of what is going to stay the same around and how it really fits in. And so that's where I ask the questions that I do about, can the road be in a different position? Can we have a sidewalk? Yeah, some of those things are slightly, not what you're gonna get if you're in a brand new flat place of swath of land that's just in the middle of nowhere. But being respectful and congruent with existing long-standing property is really important in our redevelopment. So that's feedback that I would give to any developer who's redeveloping in our city. And not to say that that's I don't want to infringe upon property rights or development rights, but I just think that's being a good neighbor and recognizing that in our city. There are some things that I really like about this project. The fact that, we have said we have a product that is missing in our city, a single level, smaller home for a lot of residents in our city would enjoy something with a smaller, yard maintenance requirement, that would like to have a master on the main level. It fits a lot of those needs in our city. So I appreciate that is, I like to see new innovative ways of presenting housing options, because although we have a lot of single family that is a certain size on a certain lot in our neighborhoods in Centerville, I think it's important that we recognize that not all families are the same, and it's good to have a product that can work for an individual or a family or a couple or whatever it is that can provide that diversity of neighborhood that I think makes a community really great. So I appreciate that. I still have issue with the existing building. I just don't like those kinds of projects. It kind of irks me a little bit, and it feels like, well, what's going to happen? This feels out of place. And I also feel like in our code, there is something that maybe we should address with this general plan as far as setbacks of a full lot when there are multiple buildings on it. I feel like that can get tricky. But as it stands now, and as it is in our code, this follows it. So from an administrative standpoint, I'm okay with it.
Thanks. That's good. Anybody else? you don't have to. I'll say, Becky kind of alluded to this. Becky and I are the old timers on the planning commission. We've seen three different versions of a development on this site here, and I have to say this is my favorite one of the three. We're not, nothing against previous ideas, but we're not trying to shoehorn in a two-story townhome in the backyard of an old home anymore. I think that this feels much more complete and feels like a complete project. I'm comfortable kind of with the feeling that Mr. Morris and the neighbors can work together to figure out something that'll work well, not just today, but other times. I've seen a lot of good interaction. Obviously, the neighbors are not afraid to talk to Mr. Morris about different thoughts, comments, and concerns, and obviously you want to build a project that's going to be successful and not just that the neighbors aren't rooting against, right? So I think that I feel comfortable that those types of concerns can be resolved. So, like I said, the best of the three so far. Hopefully there's not like a fourth complete rewrite. So, anyway, anybody else have any thoughts or comments? Okay. I have somewhere in here. I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to accept the conceptual site plan for Canyon Point in Centerville, located at approximately 347 North, 400 East, with the directives 1 through 10 in the staff report and suggested reasons for action A through C.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. I think we're over here. Commissioner Lawson.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. That was a good discussion. For those, if you missed any part of it, go check YouTube. It was really great. We'll hopefully see it back for a final site plan in a little bit and go from there. All right, let us move now to the fourth item on our agenda, which is a discussion about the definition of location. And I'm going to blame Commissioner Kerr for this. Just kidding. Turn the time over to Lisa.
Well, thank you. At your last Planning Commission meeting, you did recommend a positive recommendation to the City Council for the food truck ordinance. And we're taking that to the City Council next Tuesday. So I just thought we had enough time to bring this one issue back to the Planning Commission. I don't know if you gave me the direction to, just add something if I wanted to, but the suggestion was that, maybe we should define location because a lot of the regulations in the ordinance talk about, if you leave your food truck at the same location. And so, it's a reasonable question of what does location mean. And if you go to the dictionary definition, it wasn't really that satisfying to me. So I do think that it would be reasonable to add a definition of either, same location, but I was hesitant to do some sort of distance, like was suggested 1,000 feet or 500 feet, because you might have, a narrow, some of our lots are 80 feet wide or, so I would like to suggest that we define same location as the same lot or parcel. Now, it might be problematic in our commercial because if, let's say over in the Target project, it's all one big lot, but I do think that if Target, has a food truck, they can't just move it to the other side of their parking lot. I mean, that is the same food truck. So, and I did review some of the statutes because there are some restrictions on location and that kind of thing, but I think we can add this, and it was a reasonable, good suggestion from the Planning Commission. So I just wanted to see if that's okay rather than a distance. I just want to say lot or parcel. It gives us something to go on. And then my other comment is, so I searched location in our ordinance, and we use two different terms. We use location, and we use same location. Because the state statute talks about same location in terms of 10 hours a week, or if you move it from, but our business licensing also talks about, hey, you can't require another business license for different locations in the city. But, so initially I was just going to define same location, but I actually want to just say, look, location and same location is the same thing. It's a parcel or lot, and we'll use that as, for business licensing and zoning as our definition. So I just want to run that by you. I can, since the packet goes out on Friday, I can just add that to the ordinance that goes to the city council in their packet, for next Tuesday.
Yeah, my initial thought when I saw this on the agenda was that, a lot or parcel, because I think that was the idea, that was part of the discussion, and I don't want to put words in Commissioner Kerr's mouth, but, we don't want people just kind of moving around the same location, lot or parcel.
Exactly. Well, he's exactly right. I mean, if you take a parking ticket, as long as you move it, you're not, they come and do the chalk line and whatever. So I didn't really want to get into that kind of enforcement. So I think it was a good recommendation.
Yeah, and I think that we also want to be sensitive as well to those people who may seek to stay in the same location and go through that separate process of permitting for that, right? So that they're following the rules, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we don't have those who are just trying to get around it somehow.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I don't know if anybody else has any discussion or thoughts or comments.
I think it's a great solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to be responsive. Also, just to let you know, there are some proposed amendments to the food truck statutes, so we'll see if those pass, and if so, we might be making some changes as well. One of the things they're proposing is to now include ice cream trucks and food carts in the definition of food truck. So I had just told you that they're different things, but they want to make them all one and regulate them similarly, and then there's some other business licensing restrictions, but I'll just keep an eye on that. But I think this is a great suggestion, and I'll add it to the ordinance before we take it to the council.
And Lisa, when you say they, do you mean the legislature or the city council?
Yes, the big they.
The big they. the they up on the hill. Got it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well,
The they until March 4th.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how they handle it. So, anything else for Lisa?
Thanks for being proactive on that. I like it.
Thanks, Lisa. It
Great.
is good. Okay, let's go on to the Community Development Director's report and City Council report. Corey.
Thanks, Chair Daly. Can I have permission to stir the jambalaya pot for just a minute?
Uh-oh.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can deny.
It's interesting to listen to the commission's discussion. Having been here for a long time, it's interesting what you're pointing out as negatives today, which were seen as positives in 2017. Commissioner Sagrud, I understand your struggle with infill in the Dual Creek neighborhood. It's predominantly single family. The leftover from that, though, is it used to be duplex zone. The whole center of town used to be duplex zoning. And the city took that away in 2002 and returned it to single family in the Dual Creek. And then we've been treating Dual Creek primarily as a single family area. The city council left some areas in the Dual Creek as residential medium, this property being one of them. I see your compatibility issues. I agree with Commissioner Larson's point of view. Maybe the city should have taken that zoning and pared it down to just the units that faced 400 North and left the rest of the property as single family. Might have been difficult to develop, but I see the point of it. You know, the thing that to be concerned about just from a planning standpoint, from a legal standpoint, once a property is zoned residential medium, to turn it down if it meets requirements puts us in a compromising situation, even though I agree in principle with your concern. The issue Becky brought up and some others about the roadway, I think the roadway works better on the north side rather than the south side against the single family. yeah, it does affect what's on the corner and the two houses down the street, but they're already zoned RM, and they could turn around and tear down that house and build a duplex if their property's big enough. And so they can capitalize economically, so I'd rather have the road on the north side than the south side, where the residents to the south can't capitalize on a greater density. However, welcome to the consequence. 2017, we didn't require big lanes down serving multifamily. You could have had a small lane, small driveways. And in 2017, the city said, we don't like that. We want a city street. We want 27 feet of right-of-way. It might be a private lane, but we want it as a street. And so that was disciplined and designed in 2017 to make it a street. And so that's why you're struggling, is because the city made a choice in 2017 that all these multifamily zones are going to build citywide streets. And so this discussion about 3 streets was quite fascinating to think about historically. The city wanted the bigger streets in 2017. And now we're finding the problem with building bigger streets, which I agree with. And so we got this football, or tennis match going back and forth on what to do with multifamily zones. And then the last thing just to think about, one of the articles you'll see, and it's coming out more and more from the economics of Utah, we're missing what we call the middle housing. The middle housing market is where we have any potential for, it's not going to be affordable homes, but they're not going to be the $500,000 homes in a lot of cities. That doesn't necessarily mean Centerville. Centerville is a high-priced area. It's not too hard to hit 500,000 on any product that you build. But in general, the middle housing is not available. And infill development is a place to think about that middle housing. And so when you think about the general plan, private roads, setbacks, buffers, Mr. Morris had some arguments. The pro forma of tearing down a home and trying to fit a second one in doesn't work out economically, so they're doing something that's probably not all that great and not all that different than the Porter Walton that left the Hafoka home that was large in the north east section of that project, because it was difficult to tear it down because the city wouldn't allow any more density to occur. So the pro forma said you got to keep that great big home there. So think about those things: middle housing, infill. How much do you demand? How much do you require? What kind of densities do you allow if we have to do infill? One of the things that I give a great example is you have Mr. Randall that owns Randall Station. He has about 1.2 acres of property. It's long and skinny. He's left that for his horses for long before I could imagine being born on this planet. And he didn't sell out to all his neighbors. He didn't sell out his property for the density he could have got on that acreage. He kept it as a long-term resident of the city. All his neighbors sold out around him. We built subdivisions around him. And now he has a piece of property that's going to be really, really difficult to infill with. And he has over an acre with an existing old 1920s home. And how do we deal that? Do we want a 27-foot road in there? We took away flag lots. He can't do a flag lot. What is he going to do with his property? What are we going to do to encourage some middle housing and some infill? So yeah, I think the general plan is an interesting discussion, and keep that all in mind. So there's my soapbox. I'm done. So the director's report, we have a lot split, a subdivision that took place in the 80s but didn't get city approval. It's coming back before you to try to rectify that. I'm working on the parking schedule, converting some of those numbers. It's been interesting to see a few of the outcomes on the conversion of those numbers. I think there is an improvement in both directions, requiring more parking and lowering the parking. So I think that's pretty good. City council report, you're aware that we adopted accessory dwelling. We have an interested party. We don't have a fee adopted, so we went to the council. We matched the $150 fee, which is probably low for recouping all the costs of the city, but it at least helps not subsidize. And the $150 is very similar to a home occupation conditional use. So we put about We'll probably put a little bit more staff time in the CUP process, but depending on how they do the accessory dwelling, if it's just accessory dwelling internal, a minimal amount of time. If they do additions or part of a construction, it'll be more staff time. So we picked 150 and the city council adopted it. And then there's your goals listed out. So that's the director's report unless you have questions.
No, thanks, Corey. Those goals are looking good. I like to see in progress and underway. So,
I appreciate your thoughts, Corey, and I appreciate the middle, whatever you called it. Middle housing. I know that's been one of my personal goals as a commissioner over the years, is to see if we can make that happen somewhere in our city, because the more that we build and change, it just keeps getting more and more expensive. And I mean, it's a concern for more than our city, it's a concern for our whole nation, but having, pushing back against that, and that's part of the reason why I like, I think it's it's not Dave Bell anymore, is it? It was behind Dave Bell. The lane.
Yeah.
Because it does create that sort of middle housing option, so I appreciate that.
all right. Let's, we're coming down the home stretch. Let's wrap things up here real quick with a review of our minutes from our last meeting. Go through this quickly. Any suggested changes on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Great. You want to make a motion?
I move to accept the minutes of our Wednesday, January 26th, 2022 meeting minutes as unamended.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. We'll do this one all together. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.